Do you remember the dinners every working mom used to make? The ones no one makes anymore? They filled tired kitchens with warmth and kept families close through long workdays. When did we stop cooking the meals that made us feel cared for? Chicken cornbread casserole was the kind of dish that waited patiently in every mother's recipe box, ready to rescue a tired evening. It began with shredded chicken, often left over from Sunday dinner, mixed into a can of cream soup, and seasoned with just enough salt and pepper to taste like comfort itself. Over that went the cornbread mix, sweetened slightly, poured on thick, and baked until it rose golden and fragrant. The oven did most of the work while the kids finished homework or the washing machine spun in the next room. When it came out, the smell filled the house with something that felt like gratitude, buttery, warm, and steady. Slicing into it meant the end of a long day. The filling was creamy, soft, and rich from the soup, while the top was firm and crumbly in the best way. It was a small miracle of convenience and care, the kind of food that made you feel seen after a shift, after errands, after everything life could throw. Moms knew it was dependable. A casserole that did not need measuring cups, only memory. It fed everyone, left no one hungry, and always felt special even though it came from the simplest ingredients. This was not fast food. It was fast love, baked golden in a single pan. Beef and tater tot bake was what happened when practicality met pride. It started with ground beef browned in a skillet mixed with canned vegetables, cream soup, and a pinch of seasoning that every mother knew by heart. Then came the tater tots, lined neatly across the top like soldiers waiting for duty, ready to turn crisp and golden in the oven. The smell that followed was the smell of relief, warm, savory, and steady. The bubbling soup beneath made a soft stew while the tots stayed crunchy, giving each bite a bit of both comfort and contrast. It was a weeknight win that felt like victory, a way to make something hearty without much time or money. When the casserole dish hit the table, conversation started again. The sound of forks clinking was a soundtrack to everyday life, simple, predictable, and full. It proved that love did not need fancy ingredients. It just needed to show up hot. Minute steak with onions was speed in a skillet, the perfect answer to evenings that ran too long. Thin cuts of beef sizzled fast in butter, joined by sliced onions that caramelized into sweetness almost before the table was set. A side of instant potatoes or buttered noodles finished the job, turning a quick fry into a meal worth sitting down for. You could hear the hiss of the pan, smell the onion melting into the meat, and no dinner was just minutes away. It was not glamorous, but it was honest. Food that filled a plate and a need. Working moms leaned on it because it worked every time. The pan drippings became a kind of gravy, wiped up with bread or potatoes. No one complained. No one left hungry. It was the taste of the 1970s kitchen, quick, fragrant, and made with quiet endurance. The hamburger gravy over toast was born from tight weeks and nearly empty fridges. Ground beef, flour, and milk. That was all it needed to become something rich enough to stretch across a family. The beef browned, the flour went in, and the milk thickened into a smooth, creamy sauce that poured over toasted bread like comfort made visible. It was cheap, yes, but it never felt poor. The smell of it hit every corner of the house, a mix of butter and warmth that made everything feel fine for a while. Some added onions, others a splash of Worcestershire sauce, but it never asked for more than it had. Dinner was ready in minutes, and the plates came back clean every time. Moms liked that part most, the quiet proof that she had done enough. This was food that held a family together, even when the cupboards were thin. Sausage and cabbage skillet was the one-pan wonder that turned thrift into art. A single link of sausage, sliced thin, met a pile of cabbage that wilted down into tenderness, flavored by onions and a touch of pepper. The smell was sharp, smoky, and comforting all at once. It cooked fast but tasted slow, the kind of dish that tasted better than it had any right to. Moms liked it because it stretched what little meat they had into a meal that could fill everyone's plate. The cabbage soaked up all the flavor, and the sausage gave it heart. It was the definition of economy. No waste, no rush, just a skillet and a bit of love. Steam filled the kitchen windows, and the air felt alive. This dish proved that patience and seasoning could make miracles from scraps. Every bite carried pride, and every pan told a story of strength. Chicken spaghetti was the kind of meal that made everyone pause and smile when the oven door opened. It was creamy, cheesy, and colorful, made with shredded chicken, chopped bell peppers, and a can or two of condensed soup that stretched flavor farther than anyone expected. The spaghetti went in soft, tangled in sauce until it turned into a rich casserole that could feed a crowd with ease. The cheese bubbled on top, golden and stringy, the sort that clung to every forkful. It was the definition of a working mother's magic, quick, practical, and somehow perfect every time. Kids loved it because it was warm and familiar. Adults loved it because it made leftovers worth looking forward to. It was not fancy food, but it was family food, built to comfort after long days and long weeks. It said, "You are home now." Every bite was a reminder that love could be creamy and baked, tucked into the shape of a casserole. The recipe lived in every small-town kitchen, written on note cards smudged with sauce and fingerprints. It could feed 6 or 10 or more, depending on what needed stretching. Some added mushrooms, others a handful of peas, and every family claimed their way was best. But no matter the version, the smell of bubbling cheese and pepper always meant one thing. The day was done, and dinner was taken care of. Beef and barley soup was a working woman's patience in a pot. It started early, with tough cuts of beef browned slow, onions and carrots sizzling until they softened, and barley sprinkled in to thicken everything with heartiness. The smell drifted through the house all afternoon, a sign that something was waiting at the end of the day. It was the kind of meal that didn't need tending, just trust. The kind that simmered quietly while laundry dried and homework got done. By dinner, the broth was deep and rich, the barley plump, the beef tender enough to fall apart with a spoon. It was nutrition dressed as nostalgia, proof that time could turn cheap cuts into something almost luxurious. Moms made it not for praise, but for peace, to warm everyone from the inside out. It was the kind of soup that could cure almost anything a long day brought. The pot itself seemed to hum with warmth, each bubble carrying the smell of comfort. Bread might have been stale, but dipped in that broth, it tasted new again. Every bowl came with seconds, and every refill came with thanks. This was love slow-cooked, ladled gently, and served with pride, the quiet kind that asked for nothing back. Oven barbecue chicken legs were the sticky glory of weeknight dinners. They started with a pack of drumsticks, cheap, meaty, and always enough for everyone. The sauce came from a bottle, sweet and tangy, sometimes mixed with a splash of vinegar or brown sugar to make it taste homemade. The smell hit first, smoky, sweet, and slow-baked until the sauce turned thick and glossy. The skin crisped just right, caramelizing at the edges while the meat stayed tender underneath. It was a dinner made with no fuss, just trust in the oven's quiet work. The sound of that first bite, the pull of tender chicken against the glaze, was the sound of reward. Moms loved it because it fed many without costing much. It filled bellies, brought people to the table, and left sticky smiles behind. The kind of meal you lick your fingers after, grateful for the simple goodness of it all. The sauce left rings on the plates and napkins, proof of joy and appetite. The leftovers were even better, cold or reheated, eaten standing at the stove the next day. It was the kind of food that asked for nothing more than a paper towel and a moment of peace, the kind every working mother deserved. Chili mac was what happened when leftovers became a second chance. It started with last night's chili, thick, spicy, and still holding its heat, stirred into freshly boiled elbow macaroni until it became something new entirely. The cheese, if there was any left in the fridge, went on top, melting just enough to hold everything together. The dish was quick, cheap, and full of life, a perfect fix for nights when time ran out and hunger could not wait. Kids loved it because it felt like comfort in a bowl. Moms loved it because it meant nothing was wasted. Every spoonful was hearty, familiar, and full of flavor that felt earned. It was thrift made joyful, proof that leftovers were not the end of the meal but the start of another. In homes where every dollar counted, Chili Mac stretched both food and gratitude farther than anyone thought possible. It was the weeknight hero of kitchen tables across America. Easy, satisfying, and always ready to save the day. The scent of chili mixed with noodles was as real as laughter, and every bite tasted like togetherness. It was what family looked like, messy, warm, and enough for everyone. Stuffed shells with cottage cheese were the gentle dream of an Italian meal done Southern style. The shells were filled not with expensive ricotta, but with cottage cheese, seasoned with parsley, salt, and a touch of garlic. A jar of tomato sauce made the base, poured thickly over the top and baked until bubbling and fragrant. It was an American twist on an old-world favorite, created by moms who refused to let cost keep them from giving their families something special. The cottage cheese melted softly inside, creamy but light, soaking up the sauce's sweetness. It was filling, tender, and bright on the plate, a little taste of luxury without the price. On weeknights, when money was tight but love was steady, it was enough. It made the table feel like Sunday again. Working mothers built memories one baked dish at a time, turning what they had into what everyone needed. The first forkful was always a quiet one, just to savor the mix of tomato and cheese. Even the smallest kids could sense that this meal meant care. It was proof that joy could be homemade, that pride could be baked into pasta, and that even ordinary kitchens could create a moment of grace. Turkey and rice skillet was a weeknight lifesaver, the kind of dinner that could appear from almost nothing. It began with bits of leftover turkey, chopped fine and browned in a single pan, with a handful of frozen vegetables, peas, carrots, corn, whatever was on hand. A scoop of rice went in next, soaking up every bit of flavor as it simmered with a little broth. The scent was soft and homey, the kind that filled the kitchen with quiet reassurance. Nothing about it was fancy, but everything about it worked. Moms leaned on it when time was short and energy was low, knowing it could feed a family for pennies. The rice puffed up tender, the vegetables brightened with salt and butter, and the turkey gave just enough richness to make it feel complete. It was balance in a skillet, light but satisfying, simple but full of heart. Some added soy sauce or onion powder to stretch its flavor. Others kept it plain, letting the rice and turkey speak for themselves. It tasted like peace after a long day, proof that even the most ordinary ingredients could make something wonderful when stirred with love. Canned salmon patties were the ocean's answer to tight budgets. The can opener clicked, the fish flaked apart, and with an egg, a bit of onion, and crushed crackers, dinner took shape. Each patty hit the hot skillet with a sizzle, turning golden and crisp at the edges. The smell was rich and savory, the kind of aroma that promised something satisfying even before the first bite. Served with mashed potatoes and peas, it made a plate that looked like comfort itself. The outside was crunchy, the inside soft and tender, holding just enough salt to remind you of the sea. It was the kind of meal that didn't need explaining. Everyone just knew it would be good. Moms loved how fast it came together, how far one can could go. The leftovers, if there were any, made fine sandwiches the next day. It was proof that thrift could taste elegant when cooked with care. Ground beef hash was the sound of a skillet crackling at sunset. Potatoes, onions, and beef came together without a recipe, guided only by instinct and experience. Everything sizzled together until the potatoes browned and the onions turned sweet. A sprinkle of salt and pepper was all it needed, though some mothers tossed in a dash of ketchup or Worcestershire for depth. It was hearty, filling, and honest, the kind of dinner that didn't talk, just did its job. Every bite had texture, soft in the middle, crisp at the edges, and rich with flavor from the browned bits stuck to the pan. It was food meant to be eaten hot, straight from the skillet, with maybe a fried egg on top if you were lucky. Nothing about it was wasted. Nothing about it was delicate. It was survival turned delicious, the sound of care disguised as simplicity. Chicken fricassee was elegance on a dime, a creamy stovetop stew that made the kitchen smell like Sunday even on a Tuesday. Bone-in chicken simmered slow in a white sauce made from broth, flour, and a touch of milk until it turned velvety smooth. Carrots and peas joined in, bright against the pale gravy, filling the pot with color and comfort. The sauce thickened as it cooked, clinging to every piece of chicken until it looked like something straight out of a cookbook. But this was not luxury. This was love disguised as dinner. Moms learned to stretch every bit of flavor, using what they had to make something that tasted rich. The steam fogged the windows, the wooden spoon moved slow, and the smell said everything that words could not. It was the kind of meal that made you stop and breathe before taking that first bite. Bologna and potato fry-up was the dinner of last resort that no one complained about. Sliced bologna browned in a skillet until the edges curled, joined by cubed potatoes that fried crisp in the same pan. The onions went in next, sizzling in the leftover grease, filling the kitchen with that unmistakable scent of survival and satisfaction. Salt, pepper, and maybe a little mustard were all it needed to come alive. It was cheap, quick, and filling. The kind of meal that got families through those long stretches between paydays. Kids loved the salty flavor. Parents loved that it cost almost nothing and still felt like home. The sound of the spatula scraping the skillet became a kind of evening music, steady and sure. It was not a recipe so much as a rhythm, one born of practicality and pride. Corned beef and cabbage bake was a shortcut to tradition. Instead of boiling all day like the old recipes, this version layered sliced corned beef, cabbage, and diced potatoes in a casserole dish, then baked it until the top crisped and the vegetables softened into sweetness. The smell filled the house, tangy, buttery, and deep. Moms liked it because it kept the heart of the meal without the hours of waiting. The corned beef melted into the cabbage, its salt and spice seasoning everything it touched. It was hearty but light, the kind of dish that could stretch one can of meat to feed 6 plates. It was a modern take on an old comfort, one that fit into the rhythm of work, school, and family. Every forkful tasted like heritage and invention mixed together, the kind of dinner that carried the past into the present. The sound of the oven timer brought everyone to the kitchen, where the air was thick with the scent of pepper and cabbage. Slices of bread waited beside the dish, ready to soak up the juices left behind. Even in its simplicity, it carried pride, a meal that honored what came before while embracing what needed to be done now. It was thrift-turned tradition, baked golden and shared warm. Turkey pot pie with biscuit topping was the warmest kind of thrift. Leftover turkey, peas, and carrots swam in creamy gravy beneath a golden crust of drop biscuits. It came from the hands of mothers who knew how to make one meal become 2, maybe 3. The oven turned the house into a bakery, filling it with the scent of butter and broth. When the spoon broke through the crust, steam rose up like memory. Each bite was soft, savory, and full of gratitude. It was food made for togetherness, for laughter between bites, for quiet seconds before bedtime. The flaky biscuits soaked up the gravy like sponges, making every taste better than the last. It was proof that the best meals were born not from plenty, but from purpose. The clatter of plates, the scrape of spoons, the sighs after second helpings, all of it felt like love taking form. Every bite carried effort, every crumb a piece of care. In the quiet after dinner, moms wiped the counter, knowing they had done enough. It was comfort sealed in crust, a reminder that joy could be baked from what was left behind. Hot dish with creamed corn was the beating heart of Midwestern comfort. It was ground beef browned in a skillet, mixed with egg noodles, creamed corn, and soup from a can until everything became one perfect bubbling whole. The top browned just enough to crisp, giving way to a creamy, rich center that stuck to your ribs. It was warm, predictable, and perfect. The kind of food that could make you forget about the wind outside or the bills waiting on the counter. Every family had their own version. Some added cheese, others green beans. But they all shared the same truth. It was cheap, filling, and made with love. In that small act of stirring everything together, working moms turned exhaustion into nourishment. It was proof that simplicity could hold as much love as any feast. the edges baked just firm enough to give each serving a crust, a golden seal on a hard day's effort. When it hit the table, plates were filled before the prayer was even finished. It was food that needed no words, only gratitude. Each spoonful carried the rhythm of routine and the comfort of knowing that even in life's hurry, there was still room for care. Egg noodle stroganoff without beef was the creative fix for lean weeks. Mushrooms and onions replaced the meat, sautéed slow until golden before being folded into sour cream and broth. The noodles were cooked soft, catching every bit of sauce in their curls. It was creamy and comforting, a dish that felt indulgent even when it was born of necessity. The kitchen smelled rich, the kind of scent that made kids run to the table. It filled plates generously and hearts quietly. Moms took pride in this kind of invention, in turning limits into flavor. It was food that told the truth, that care was the main ingredient all along. The sauce shimmered as it cooled, clinging to the noodles like a small luxury. It was a dinner that reminded families that grace could be found in doing your best with what you had. Some added a pinch of paprika or a splash of milk to stretch the sauce. Others simply trusted the pan. No one left hungry, and that was all that mattered. Frankfurter supper stew was childhood fun served in a bowl. Sliced hot dogs bubbled in a pot of beans, corn, and tomatoes until everything thickened into a sweet, smoky stew. It was fast, cheap, and full of joy, the kind of meal that brought giggles to the table. Every spoonful was a mix of soft beans and tangy tomato, with the salt of the hot dogs tying it all together. It was the kind of dish that needed no sides and no apology, only bread to soak up what was left. The pot emptied fast, proof that satisfaction did not need sophistication. It was family food in its truest form, humble, hearty, and made for laughter. The hot dogs curled slightly at the edges, soaking up all that tomato flavor until they glistened. Kids loved it for its sweetness. Parents loved it because it filled everyone up for next to nothing. It was the sound of spoons clinking, the sight of empty bowls, the comfort of knowing that even on the leanest nights there was joy in sharing what you had. Canned ham glazed bake turned an ordinary evening into something that felt almost like a holiday. The ham came from a can, sliced thick and arranged neatly in a baking dish, each piece topped with a pineapple ring and a cherry in the middle. Brown sugar and mustard melted together into a glossy glaze that bubbled down the sides, caramelizing as it baked. The scent that filled the kitchen was sweet, smoky, and cheerful, the kind of smell that made the smallest dinner feel like celebration. Working moms loved it because it looked fancy but cost little, and it could feed a table full of hungry faces without complaint. The glaze thickened at the corners, the ham crisped around the edges, and the pineapple turned golden, soft, and fragrant. Every forkful tasted like nostalgia, sweet and salty, simple and proud. Some families made it on Sundays, others on Tuesdays, but it always brought joy. The leftover syrup in the pan was spooned over rice or mashed potatoes, nothing ever wasted. It was proof that even convenience could hold warmth, and that love did not need to be slow to be real. Beef and cabbage skillet supper was dinner that smelled like strength. Ground beef browned in a cast-iron skillet, joined by chopped cabbage, diced onion, and a pinch of pepper. Everything sizzled together until the cabbage softened and the beef turned rich and flavorful. The steam fogged the kitchen window, the air thick with the scent of home. It was hearty but light, a full meal in one pan, made for nights when everyone was too tired for fuss. The cabbage soaked up all the juices, creating something between a stew and a stir-fry long before stir-fry was ever trendy. A few splashes of vinegar gave it brightness. A spoon of sugar softened the bite. It was both humble and bold, the perfect balance of thrift and taste. Every bite carried the memory of work boots by the door and quiet gratitude at the table. It was not just dinner. It was survival turned satisfying. Cheeseburger pie was comfort disguised as play. Ground beef browned in a skillet mixed with onion, cheese, and a pour of biscuit batter that baked into a crust both soft and golden. The oven turned it into something special, rich, melty, and nostalgic all at once. It looked like pie but tasted like dinner, a trick that kids adored. The top puffed slightly as it baked, filling the house with the smell of cheddar and bread. It came out bubbly and warm, easy to slice, and even easier to love. For working moms, it was dinner done fast, full of flavor and full of heart. It made something ordinary feel brand new, the kind of dish that erased the day's exhaustion in one bite. The leftovers reheated perfectly, if there were any. It was comfort by the panful, the taste of ingenuity, family, and the quiet pride of doing a lot with a little. Vegetable chowder with saltines was soup born from imagination. A few cans of mixed vegetables, a splash of milk, a knob of butter, and a spoon of flour turned into something creamy, hearty, and full of care. Potatoes made it thick, corn made it sweet, and a crumble of saltines on top made it complete. The smell was soft and warm, like milk steaming beside a stove. It filled bowls that had seen better days and hearts that just needed something kind. Moms made it without measuring. A handful of this, a pinch of that, trusting instinct over recipe. It was not fancy, but it was honest. You could taste the effort in every spoonful. Children dipped crackers into the bowl until only a few crumbs remained, proof that love had been served again. It was the art of enough, simmered slowly and shared quietly. Pork chop and rice bake was the miracle of one dish doing it all. A layer of rice went down first, mixed with onion soup mix and broth, soaking up flavor while it baked. Pork chops rested on top, browning in the oven until tender, their juices seeping into the rice below. The house filled with the scent of onion and butter, the kind that wrapped around you like a blanket. When the dish came out bubbling, it needed no sides, no extras, just a spoon. Each bite was salty, savory, and rich, tasting far fancier than its humble ingredients. Moms loved it because it was simple. No stirring, no watching, just trust in the oven's quiet promise. It was comfort made convenient, a dinner that felt slow even when time was short. The edges crisped, the center stayed soft, and the flavor lingered long after the plates were cleared. Grits and sausage supper was Southern practicality at its finest. Leftover breakfast sausage met creamy grits for a meal that was fast, filling, and deeply satisfying. The grits simmered smooth while the sausage sizzled brown, the two combining into something that felt both rustic and rich. Moms made it when dinner needed to happen quickly, and nobody could bear another sandwich. A pat of butter and a sprinkle of pepper made it perfect, simple as it was. It was comfort that cost almost nothing, spooned into bowls, served hot, and eaten without hurry. The smell of sausage hung in the air, earthy and familiar, reminding everyone that food did not need to be fancy to feel good. It was the kind of meal that filled bellies and quieted rooms. Every bite felt like home, thick with warmth and gratitude. The sound of spoons scraping bowls was steady and soft, a sign that everyone was content. It was food that soothed the spirit, built from the rhythm of routine and the wisdom of making do. Even after long days, it brought a sense of calm to the table, a quiet celebration of enough. Nothing about it was extravagant, yet it carried the dignity of care, proof that love could still be found in the humblest suppers. Barbecue bean casserole with ground beef was weeknight barbecue without the grill. It began with baked beans and browned beef, stirred together with a swirl of barbecue sauce until everything gleamed. The oven baked it until the edges caramelized, the sauce thickened, and the smell spread through the house. It was smoky, sweet, and filling, the kind of food that made you close your eyes for a second after the first bite. Served with soft white bread or a scoop of slaw, it fed everyone for pennies. The beans stayed tender, the beef turned deep and savory, and the sauce tied it all together with a tang that lingered. Moms knew it was foolproof, the perfect dump-and-bake dinner that always hit the spot. It was a small celebration of thrift, a little smoky joy after long days. The way the sauce bubbled around the edges made the house feel alive, as if laughter itself had taken form in the oven. It was sticky, sweet, and satisfying in the truest sense, not elegant, but honest. Families lingered at the table longer after this meal, soaking bread in the last bits of sauce, unwilling to let the warmth fade too quickly. Hamburger pie with mashed potatoes was shepherd's pie reimagined for the American table. Ground beef cooked with onions and vegetables filled the bottom of a glass baking dish, then got covered with mashed potatoes smooth as clouds. The top browned just slightly, turning golden and crisp at the edges. Each layer told a story: the meat of labor, the potatoes of care, the warmth of love. It was hearty enough for any appetite, but soft enough for even the littlest ones. Moms baked it when the week had worn everyone thin, knowing it would bring smiles without complaint. It was the kind of dinner that required no words, just seconds. The smell of gravy and potatoes lingered long after, a quiet reminder of comfort earned and shared. When the spoon broke through the crust, it released steam that carried the scent of home-cooked grace. The casserole dish always came back empty, scraped clean with gratitude. Each serving tasted like relief, rich, familiar, and dependable. It was the food of kindness, the kind that needed no decoration or praise, only the comfort of being together. Chopped steak with mushroom gravy was ground beef pretending to be fancy and succeeding. Patties formed by hand hit the skillet with a satisfying sizzle, searing brown before being drowned in rich mushroom gravy made from a can. The sauce bubbled thick, coating everything in flavor. It looked like something from a restaurant, but cost less than $5 to make. The smell was indulgent, earthy, and savory, a small luxury after long hours of work. Served with rice or mashed potatoes, it turned dinner into something to savor. The mushrooms added depth, the gravy added comfort, and the beef held it all together. It was proof that care could turn the simplest meal into something special. The sizzling pan filled the air with hope, the sound of something good after something hard. Each bite tasted of pride, the pride of a mother who gave her best even when the world gave little. Families lingered over this meal, savoring its richness and the quiet joy it carried. It was proof that love could wear many flavors, sometimes tender, sometimes strong, but always enough. Vegetable and cheese quiche was quiet elegance in a busy world. Frozen pie crusts were filled with beaten eggs, leftover vegetables, and shredded cheese, baked until puffed and golden. The kitchen smelled of butter and warmth, the kind that slowed everything down for a moment. It was beautiful on the table, bright with color and soft inside. Moms made it when they needed something light but lovely, proof that even exhaustion could produce grace. Each slice was tender, rich, and full of small victories. It was nourishment and pride in equal measure. Every bite said what words could not, that love, even tired love, was still love. The first slice always held the most promise, the crust flaking just right, the cheese stretching softly beneath the fork. Kids often did not realize they were eating leftovers. It felt like something special. In truth, it was a gift, crafted from care, patience, and the quiet art of making something beautiful from what remained. Crock-pot stews with budget cuts became a hallmark of clever 1960s cooking as slow cookers began finding their way into more households. Tougher cuts of meat that were cheaper at the butcher could be transformed into tender, flavorful meals after hours of slow simmering. Moms would add potatoes, carrots, onions, and broth, letting everything meld together while they went about their day. The result was a warm, hearty stew waiting by dinner time, made possible by a method that turned thrift into comfort. This trick saved money, reduced stress, and kept family meals consistent even in busy households. It also marked a shift toward modern appliances, making life easier while still honoring the tradition of cooking from scratch with what was available. Kids loved coming home to the smell of a crock-pot meal filling the house, and parents appreciated how far it stretched the grocery budget. Crock-pot stews with budget cuts were more than food. They were a sign of changing times, where clever tools and resourceful recipes kept families fed and happy. Using tomato soup as sauce was one of Grandma's simplest but most dependable shortcuts for flavor. With a single can of condensed tomato soup, she could take plain ground beef and transform it into a meal that was hearty, tangy, and comforting. The soup added moisture, preventing casseroles, skillet suppers, or even simple beef and rice dishes from becoming dry or bland. Its sweet, slightly tart taste gave the meal a richness that stuck in memory, tying dishes to the familiar red and white cans stacked in cupboards across America. Families grew up with that signature flavor, recognizing it immediately as the taste of comfort. For Grandma, it wasn't about cutting corners, but about using what she had wisely. And tomato soup was a pantry item that always delivered. With 1 can and a pound of beef, she could have a hot dinner ready that satisfied everyone at the table. Today, the trick feels nostalgic, but back then it was a piece of kitchen magic built out of practicality and care. Beef and barley bake was what happened when you wanted stew without the soup. You took ground beef, cooked it with onions, carrots, and sometimes celery, then stirred in pearl barley and baked the whole thing until thick, golden, and aromatic. It was a dish that felt old, like something from your grandmother's farmhouse kitchen. And maybe it was. Barley has been around longer than most grains, and during the 1960s and 1970s, it was one of those ingredients that made a quiet comeback thanks to its price and nutrition. This bake was earthy and dense, like a cross between stuffing and pot roast. You could season it with thyme or just keep it simple. It filled the house with the smell of comfort. It kept you full for hours, and it made even the cheapest cut of beef stretch a little farther. Sometimes you added a splash of tomato juice, sometimes just a pat of butter on top. It was a blank canvas, but a dependable one. You could make it ahead of time, freeze it, and reheat it without losing an ounce of flavor. It may not win beauty contests, but beef and barley bake always won dinner. Trapping natural wild yeasts for bread making was a delicate dance between patience, instinct, and trust in nature. Long before modern yeast packets made baking effortless, native chefs understood how to harness the living cultures floating invisibly all around them. They would leave simple mixtures of ground corn, acorn flour, or other grains mixed with water exposed to the open air, letting wild yeasts and beneficial bacteria settle into the mix over several days. Every loaf was alive, shaped by the air, the season, and the land itself. Each region had its own distinct flavors, a fingerprint left by invisible forces. It was slow, careful baking rooted in the rhythms of the world, not the ticking of a kitchen timer. And if you thought that was incredible, imagine making an entire soup without a pot, without a bowl, just heated rocks, fresh herbs, and the oldest cooking trick you have never heard of. Making buttermilk substitute with vinegar or lemon juice was a widely used shortcut in mid-century American kitchens when buttermilk was not always readily available or affordable. This simple trick involved adding 1 tablespoon of white vinegar or lemon juice to a cup of regular milk and letting it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes. The acid in the vinegar or lemon juice curdled the milk slightly, mimicking the tangy flavor and thicker consistency of buttermilk. This substitute worked well in recipes such as pancakes, biscuits, and cakes, where buttermilk's acidity was necessary to react with baking soda for leavening. Betty Crocker's cookbooks embraced this hack for its practicality, helping home cooks achieve consistent results without needing specialty ingredients. The trick saved time and money, reducing trips to the store and preventing spoiled buttermilk from going to waste. This approach reflected the resourcefulness encouraged in the post-war era, where adaptability in the kitchen was valued. It remains a trusted method today for anyone needing a quick buttermilk replacement. Using potato water to thicken soups and stews naturally was a clever and economical way to avoid flour or cornstarch as thickening agents. When boiling potatoes, the starchy water left behind was often saved and added to soups or stews to create a velvety texture without needing extra ingredients. Betty Crocker's recipes encouraged this practice as a resourceful method during times when pantry staples were limited or expensive. The potato water provided a subtle richness and body, enhancing the mouthfeel of broths and reducing waste in the kitchen. This trick was especially important during the Depression and wartime rationing, when stretching ingredients was essential. It also allowed cooks to keep recipes simple and gluten-free before dietary restrictions became widely known. The use of potato water as a thickener brought a natural creaminess to dishes, transforming humble soups into hearty meals. Today, many have forgotten this straightforward technique, but it remains a valuable, zero-cost way to improve soups and stews with minimal effort. Mayo in chocolate cake might sound strange to modern ears, But for 1960s, moms, it was a lifesaver when eggs and oil were too expensive or simply ran out. Mayonnaise was made from eggs and oil, so adding a spoonful to cake batter replaced both while making the cake incredibly moist. This trick became a secret weapon for birthdays, church gatherings, or any day when dessert was needed but the pantry was bare. The result was a cake so tender and rich that no one could tell it was built on substitution. Moms embraced it because it was practical, affordable, and foolproof, proving once again that resourcefulness could create results equal to or better than traditional methods. The mayonnaise cake became a beloved memory for many children of that era who associated it with celebrations even if money was tight. It was clever cooking at its best, born of necessity but remembered for indulgence. Making a gravy base from beef drippings was one of the most practical and delicious habits Grandma swore by. After frying ground beef, she never just poured off the pan juices, they were too valuable to waste. Instead, she whisked in flour, maybe a splash of broth or milk, and built a flavorful gravy that could be ladled over mashed potatoes, bread, or noodles. This simple act turned a basic skillet of beef into a complete, comforting meal that stretched to feed more mouths. It gave dinners depth and warmth, making even small portions feel satisfying. Families relied on this trick not only because it saved money, but because it created flavor from what others might have discarded. The aroma of that sizzling gravy filled kitchens and promised a meal that was both hearty and resourceful. These days, we're often told to drain and discard fat for health reasons, but back then, every drop was an opportunity. That was the beauty of Grandma's cooking, knowing how to turn scraps into something rich, flavorful, and worth remembering long after the plates were cleared. Hungarian Hamburger bake brought a little old-world flair to the weeknight dinner table. This casserole took seasoned ground beef and paired it with wide egg noodles, paprika, sour cream, and cheese. You would layer everything into a baking dish, then bake it until the noodles were tender and the sauce was bubbling and golden on top. It was creamy, smoky, and deeply satisfying. The paprika added warmth without being too spicy, and the sour cream gave it that signature tangy richness. It was not exactly authentic Hungarian cuisine, but it borrowed enough to make you feel like you were eating something a little exotic. The recipe was especially popular in Midwestern kitchens, where Eastern European immigrant traditions were still alive and well. It was the kind of dish that made you feel cultured without straying too far from your comfort zone. Most of the ingredients came from cans, boxes, or the fridge, nothing fancy or hard to find, and that was the whole point. The secret of grease preserves is one of those survival tricks that almost defies belief today. After cooking meat, Native American chefs would save every drop of rendered animal fat, pouring it carefully over shredded or chopped pieces of the meat inside clay pots or animal bladders. Once sealed, the fat hardened into a protective barrier that kept bacteria and air out, preserving the meat for weeks, even months. This was not just storage. It was insurance against famine, sickness, and scarcity. Meat preserved this way stayed rich, flavorful, and nutritious, providing vital energy when fresh food was impossible to find. Every time someone dipped into a pot of grease preserves, they were eating a lesson in patience, gratitude, and survival. But even the best preserved meat needed help lasting through long journeys or seasons, and sometimes the land itself offered the perfect cold pantry, hidden just beneath your feet. Casseroles with crushed potato chips on top might sound indulgent, but they were really a thrifty invention of clever 1960s moms. Instead of throwing away the crumbs at the bottom of a snack bag, they sprinkled them over casseroles as a crunchy topping. The chips added flavor, texture, and a golden crust that made even the simplest casserole feel exciting. Popular with tuna, chicken, or vegetable bases, the crunchy topping transformed leftovers and pantry staples into something families looked forward to. It was also a way of stretching expensive ingredients by making casseroles the star of the meal rather than a side dish. The trick appealed to kids who loved the fun of finding chips baked into dinner and reassured parents who wanted nothing to go to waste. The casserole itself became a canvas for creativity, but it was the potato chip topping that made it memorable. Moms of the 1960s proved that even the last crumbs from a snack bag could turn a basic family meal into comfort food with a touch of flair. Using waxed paper to roll out pie dough without sticking was a simple hack that made dough handling and transfer easier for home bakers. This method involved placing the dough between two sheets of waxed paper before rolling, preventing it from sticking to the rolling pin or work surface. The waxed paper acted as a non-stick barrier, reducing flour use and keeping the dough moist and pliable. Once rolled out, the dough could be easily lifted and transferred to pie pans without tearing or stretching. Betty Crocker's cookbooks promoted this technique as a way to reduce frustration and mess in mid-century kitchens, especially for novice bakers. The hack improved the overall pie-making process, resulting in better-shaped crusts and less wasted dough. It reflected the period's focus on practical solutions that saved time and improved results in home cooking. Using waxed paper for rolling dough remains a trusted tip for bakers aiming for perfect pastries. Creating mock mayonnaise with egg yolk and vinegar was a wartime-era hack that helped households cope when commercial mayonnaise was scarce or rationed. This clever substitute involved whisking egg yolks with vinegar, oil, and seasonings to mimic the creamy texture and tang of real mayonnaise. Betty Crocker's cookbooks offered this recipe as an affordable and easy alternative that required only basic pantry ingredients. The mock mayo kept salads, sandwiches, and dressings flavorful during tough economic times and supply shortages. It was particularly useful when fresh eggs and vinegar were more available than processed condiments. This homemade version might not have had the exact consistency of store-bought mayo, but it delivered the essential taste and moisture needed in classic recipes. Today, recreating this old-fashioned substitute can connect modern cooks to a resourceful culinary tradition that made simple ingredients stretch farther while keeping meals delicious and familiar. Roasting root vegetables directly in campfire coals was one of the simplest yet most powerful cooking methods passed down through generations. Without ovens, pots, or fancy tools, native cooks understood that the earth's hidden foods, things like carrots, turnips, onions, and yams, could be transformed into sweet, hearty meals with nothing more than time and fire. Raw roots were buried in the hot, glowing coals of a dying fire, slowly roasting under layers of ash and heat. As they baked, their natural sugars caramelized, their fibers softened, and what once was hard and bitter became soft, rich, and deeply satisfying. Pulling a roasted root from the coals was like uncovering buried treasure, the skin blackened and crisp, the inside steaming and tender. And speaking of patience, some of the sweetest flavors ever created by native chefs required even longer waits, like gathering and boiling maple sap into a clear, nourishing water that tasted like spring itself. Instant mashed potato magic was one of the most useful kitchen tricks of the 1960s, turning powdered flakes into more than just a side dish. Moms discovered that instant potatoes could thicken soups, stews, and gravies, giving meals extra body without requiring flour or cream. They could also be used as a base for croquettes or patties, stretching leftovers into entirely new dishes. As a side, they were quick, affordable, and surprisingly comforting when dressed up with butter or milk. The convenience of instant potatoes fit perfectly into the rhythm of busy households, where time was short but expectations for hearty meals remained high. This clever use of a modern product showed how 1960s kitchens balanced tradition with innovation. Even if some considered them a shortcut, they became a symbol of practicality and adaptability. Instant mashed potatoes were proof that even powdered food could be turned into comfort when guided by creativity. Adding grated carrots or zucchini into ground beef was a quiet, clever trick that served multiple purposes in Grandma's kitchen. It wasn't only about making the beef stretch further, though that was a big part of it. It was also about slipping in extra nutrition without anyone noticing. Carrots added a natural sweetness that balanced savory flavors, while zucchini added moisture that kept burgers, meatloaf, or casseroles from drying out. Grating the vegetables fine meant they disappeared right into the beef, and kids usually had no idea they were eating vegetables at all. In a time when every ingredient had to be used wisely, this method made sense because it extended protein portions and made meals healthier at the same time. It also gave the beef more body and volume, turning one meal into two without anyone feeling shortchanged. This trick carried a sense of care, because Grandma knew how to make meals nourishing as well as filling. Today, with rising costs and an emphasis on hidden veggies, this old idea feels surprisingly modern. It's a reminder that cleverness in cooking was never about fancy ingredients, but about small adjustments that turned the ordinary into something bigger and better than expected. Ground beef and peanut butter stew sounds like a dare, but it was actually a smart Depression-era solution that made a quiet return during the 1960s. You browned ground beef with onions, added canned tomatoes, and stirred in a big spoonful of peanut butter. That was it. Somehow, it worked. The peanut butter melted into the stew, giving it a nutty richness and silky texture that made it taste like something much fancier. You could serve it over rice or eat it with bread. Either way, it was filling, affordable, and shockingly good. It came from the tradition of using pantry staples to bulk up basic meals, especially when meat was scarce. Peanut butter added protein, calories, and a hint of sweetness that made the tomato stew feel like something more. Some recipes added beans or chili powder, others kept it simple. This stew was rarely written in official cookbooks. It was passed down through word of mouth or scribbled in the back pages of community newsletters. But for those who remembered it, it was unforgettable. It was the kind of recipe that taught you how to be bold, even in a tiny kitchen. Burying food underground for natural refrigeration was one of the quiet genius moves that let Native American families survive through blistering summers and brutal winters alike. It sounds almost too simple now, but when done right, it was remarkably effective. By digging deep, shaded pits and lining them with grass, bark, or even cool stones, they created natural refrigerators that could keep vegetables crisp, fruits fresh, and even meat safer than leaving it above ground. There was an art to it, a dance with the seasons and the soil that few today remember. But the wisdom of making the earth itself your storage partner never truly faded. And when long journeys or harsh winters loomed ahead, native chefs had another brilliant solution for keeping their people nourished on the move, mixing wild berries, nuts, and hidden energy into one of history's first real trail mixes. The original food dehydrators were not made of wires, plastic, or electricity. They were built from nothing but wood, patience, and the heat of the sun itself. Native Americans constructed simple wooden frames, stretching thin strips of meat across them like rough tapestries. Exposed to sunlight and fresh air, the meat would dry slowly, losing its moisture but locking in all the rich, smoky flavor. Sometimes the process was sped up by adding a small, smoldering fire nearby, helping to drive off insects and give the meat an even deeper taste. It was a way of preserving precious food without ice, salt, or chemicals, and the result was nothing short of incredible. Chewy, flavorful strips that could last for weeks or even months. Every bite told a story of the land it came from. Every piece was survival packed into a pocket-sized meal. Jerky might be trendy today, but it started here, with hands stretching meat under a fierce sun and trusting the earth to do the rest. But when it came to sweetening up meals and treats, they had another secret up their sleeves, and it did not involve sugar at all. Making fluffy rice by adding a pat of butter before serving was a finishing touch that added richness and enhanced flavor to simple steamed or boiled rice. This technique, recommended in Betty Crocker's cookbooks, involved stirring in butter just before serving to coat the grains, giving the rice a glossy appearance and a smooth, buttery taste. The addition of butter elevated plain rice from a basic side dish to a comforting accompaniment suitable for a variety of meals. This simple step also helped prevent the rice from clumping together, improving texture and appeal. The tip reflected mid-century home cooks' desire to make everyday dishes more enjoyable with minimal effort. Buttered rice fit well with the era's emphasis on richness and indulgence in family meals, especially when other ingredients were modest. This finishing touch continues to be a beloved way to prepare rice, combining ease and flavor in classic American cooking. Preserving herbs in oil for longer freshness was a smart pantry trick, cherished in vintage kitchens to keep garden herbs usable well beyond their natural shelf life. Instead of letting herbs wilt or dry out quickly, home cooks would finely chop fresh herbs like parsley, thyme, or rosemary and pack them tightly into clean glass jars. Then they would cover the herbs completely with olive oil or vegetable oil, sealing the jar tightly to prevent air exposure. This method created a flavorful, herb-infused oil that could be used in cooking or as a finishing touch for dishes. Not only did this technique extend the herbs' usability through winter months, but it also captured their fresh flavors in a convenient form. This old-fashioned preservation trick was especially valuable before modern freezing and refrigeration methods were widespread. It allowed families to enjoy the taste of summer herbs year-round without the cost or waste of constantly buying fresh produce. Rediscovering this method today offers a delicious way to add fresh herb flavor to everyday meals with a touch of nostalgic practicality. Tang as a breakfast staple was one of the most memorable 1960s tricks for families looking for an affordable way to brighten the morning. Fresh orange juice was expensive and often impractical to keep in the refrigerator, but Tang offered an instant alternative in powdered form. With just a spoonful of powder and water, moms could serve a bright, sweet drink that felt modern and fun. It promised vitamins, energy, and a futuristic touch thanks to its association with astronauts, which made kids love it even more. Parents liked it because it saved money and time, offering the illusion of a wholesome breakfast beverage without the high cost of fresh juice. Tang became part of morning routines across the country, a symbol of the way convenience foods reshaped family life in the 1960s. For many, it was not just a drink, but a memory of rushing out the door for school with something sweet in hand. It was clever marketing and cleverer parenting rolled together, and it remains one of the most iconic examples of 1960s breakfast ingenuity. Mixing in stale bread soaked in milk was one of those Depression-era tricks that turned necessity into brilliance. Instead of wasting old bread, Grandma would soften the slices in milk until they were almost mush, then fold them straight into ground beef. This gave the meat extra volume and body, while the milk kept it tender and juicy. It was a way to bulk up meatloaf, burgers, and patties without making them dry or heavy, and no one at the table felt like they were eating less meat. The bread simply disappeared into the mixture, leaving behind a moist, flavorful dish that stretched further than a pound should. This practice also reflected a mindset where nothing went to waste and every scrap was valuable. Today we might see it as a quaint old trick, but back then it was survival and comfort in one. It made meals not only possible but memorable, because they were built out of creativity as much as ingredients. With this method, Grandma could take what might have been thrown away and transform it into something hearty, filling, and deeply satisfying, a true testament to the resourcefulness of kitchens from that era. Sloppy Joe pie was what you made when a sandwich was not quite enough. The sweet, tangy beef, made with ketchup, mustard, and maybe brown sugar, got spooned into a dish and topped with biscuit dough or pie crust. Then it baked until golden and bubbly. It smelled like school lunches and weekday nights. The filling was classic Sloppy Joe, but the crust gave it shape. You could eat it with a fork. You could add cheese. Some families topped it with cornbread or mashed potatoes instead. It was a recipe that adapted to whatever was in the kitchen. What never changed was how satisfying it felt. One pan, one meal, one good reason to sit down and eat. It was often made after a sandwich dinner when the meat outlasted the buns. Sloppy Joe pie made the most of what was left and still gave you something to look forward to. It was humble, but proud, made for people who did not ask for much, just something warm and maybe a little sweet. Pine needle broth was one of the forgotten miracle foods of early America, a natural tonic hiding in plain sight. At a time when vitamin deficiencies could mean life or death, Native American healers knew that boiling fresh green pine needles would release a flood of nutrients, especially vitamin C. It was not just medicine, it was survival in a cup. The flavor was bright, almost citrusy, with a faint earthy bitterness that made you feel stronger just breathing it in. Families would drink pine needle broth during harsh winters, through long hunting trips, and whenever sickness crept too close. In many ways, it was the original energy drink, long before anyone ever dreamed of cans and chemicals. Modern science eventually caught up and confirmed what traditional cooks already knew. The forest was its own pharmacy, if you knew where to look. And the best part? It took almost nothing to make. Just water, heat, and a handful of needles plucked with respect from a living tree. But sometimes, even when no pot or pan was available, native chefs found a way to cook hearty, life-saving meals using nothing but stones, fire, and ancient ingenuity. Making flavored butter by mixing in kitchen herbs and spices was a quick upgrade for everyday meals in classic home cooking. Betty Crocker encouraged adding finely chopped herbs like parsley, chives, or dill, along with spices such as garlic or paprika, directly into softened butter. This infused the butter with fresh, vibrant tastes that could enhance bread, vegetables, or meats without needing elaborate sauces. It was an easy way to elevate simple meals, especially when fresh herbs were abundant in victory gardens or on windowsills. This homemade flavored butter became a signature of mid-century kitchens where cooks sought to make ordinary foods feel special with minimal effort. The practice also helped reduce reliance on costly or time-consuming condiments by using what was on hand. Today, flavored butters are seen as gourmet treats, but their roots lie in the practical and inventive cooking habits taught by Betty Crocker. Which dinner reminded you of home? Comment your favorite down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories served warm.